Welcome to the FiveStack, everybody. My name is Dean.
Hey,
That is my
everybody.
friend Shalev from narrative.org. What a day to be here. Are we Tuesday or is it Wednesday? What are we? Are we Wednesday? We got a Wednesday
It
under our
is,
belt
yes,
today?
I actually have to turn to check this. It's Wednesday afternoon,
Wednesday,
by the
yeah.
way. Yeah, it's 5:30 p.m. We do this every day, Monday to Friday. We count on the top 5 stories of the day. It's been a whirlwind 24 hours. There's been so much news breaking. I
hmm
can't barely keep up with it. And we're going to try get through all of it today. We'll just let everyone gather for a bit. Yesterday you told us your Substack story, which is a beautiful one. And thank you very
hmm
much for sharing that.
Thank you.
It's been a year since I started my Substack, although it hasn't been a consistent year on Substack. But like you, it's not like my first time doing this. I've been around for 8 years doing this as narrative.org and on Twitter as a narrative with Zev Shalev. But it's only in the last month since I have started doing this show with you that I have just seen the numbers take off in a way that I've never ever could conceivably have imagined. And I just want to credit you and credit everybody who's here tonight watching this show because without your support, a lot of this reporting just wouldn't get told. And for better or for worse, we push the boundaries, you and I, about what's in the news, and we tend to break stories that are otherwise buried by other people. So it's a privilege to work with you, Dean, and it's a privilege that everyone's here. And thank you for everyone for supporting Narrative and for supporting deanblundell.substack.com. And we're at number 11 on the news charts, rising charts, whatever they are today on Substack. So that's also good news.
Are we
Um,
really?
s- yeah. So there you go.
What, the podcast or you?
Narrative.org is, but that's largely due to us.
It's
It's
you.
us. It's us. It's all us. It's all us.
You.
I'm a big us guy.
Congratulations, you handsome devil, you. Way to go. You put in
Well,
all
you're
the
number
work.
one in
You put in the
culture,
time. Not everybody can be number one.
Does that mean you're the cultured guy and I'm the
Yeah, it's
easy
funny because I
guy?
had a friend of mine call me and he's like, "Why are you number one in culture on Substack?" And I'm like, "I know, right? Me, culture, really, right?
You seem
Like
pretty cultured
me.
to me.
I look
You know, you
cultured, but I'm really not that cultured. Like I'm the guy that wears his jeans, the same jeans for like a week and a half in a row, 2 weeks in a row. I,
super
I,
cool.
I like to, I lift weights. I cry at movies. Just started lifting weights. But I'm
Yeah.
not. I'm just a Canadian raconteur. Is all I am. I'm just kind of here. I just kind of do my thing, and to be able to find people that want to do their thing on Substack over the past little bit has been great. Where you are on a chart doesn't really matter to me,
Yeah.
although it is kind of nice, right? Like I'm not a chart watcher. I'm not a numbers guy. I'm really not, but I can tell you that it's been overwhelming. I think we're up to like 4 million page views this month, which is
Wow.
huge, right?
Wow.
So
That's
yeah,
incredible.
it's been awesome that
Well
people have
done.
interacted that much. I love it.
I love that for you because everyone knows your name in Canada. You certainly had an incredible career here in Canada. It's great that you're getting an American audience now, and it's great that you're getting the attention and appreciation you deserve because you, sir, are great talent. And I've always thought that for the 20 odd years that we've actually intersected with each other.
Mm.
It's great that we finally are working together, even though we've never actually met, which we should do at some
Yeah,
point.
we should. We live in an age where we don't have to do that, though. It's really nice.
So we have lots of news to get to. We're just waiting for everyone to gather here. We have two choices of where we want to go with the number 5. I'm going to say we'll keep the Abrego Garcia story to the end because I think that's the one that everyone
It's
really
a
wants
big
to hear
one.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, but let's start with this incredible revelation that happened yesterday on Rachel Maddow's show about what happened with Starlink. And, I'm the only person I think who's actually really pushed this angle of Starlink, but there was this whistleblower that came out from the Department, what is it, the National Labor
National
something
Labor
board,
Relations Board,
There you go.
NLRB. Yeah, it sounds like
Yeah.
an acronym for an erection, is what it
Yeah,
sounds like.
it sounds like a very dull place to
It
work, but
really does. Yeah.
but good for him for working there. And he exposed what looks to us and looks to me and many other cybersecurity experts like a real intrusion happened at NLRB right after Doge illegally was able to gain access to what they call the God mode, which means they have access to all the administrative access to this very secure database. And then he described something really unique happened. He said that once that access was established, that Doge and the engineers at Doge were able to access this database, suddenly out of nowhere, these Russian IPs started trying to log on to their systems there and trying to access all this very confidential data.
Mhm.
And this is really surprising to me because what they did back there is also really interesting. Apparently, what they were trying to do is change the security settings so other people couldn't see what they were doing, and then they were trying to upload all these files. It's the first I'd heard of Russian IPs trying to gain access to any of the Doge databases that have been accessed. And of course, that's a very big deal when you think about how close Donald Trump and Elon Musk are to Russia and to China. But then came this revelation by the lawyer, which I was just blown away by, because the guy's
The
lawyer, this is
whistleblower's lawyer, yeah.
David.
Daniel Bareilles is his name, yeah.
Yes, and the lawyer's name is, I will find it for you in a second, but
Something Batka. That's his last name's
yes,
Batka. That's all I
or
know.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyhow, he's a lawyer who does a lot of these whistleblowers. So he's obviously talking to other whistleblowers that maybe have not come forward yet. But he made these incredible claims about Starlink. He said that Starlink was involved in gaining access using these Russian IPs to this NLRB. And he said something really interesting. He said the Department of Defense had stopped using Starlink because everything that happens on Starlink can go right up from Starlink to Russia, directly to Russia, meaning these satellites have a way of accessing these databases or these computers without having to go through the regular internet. They can just go directly to the satellites and down again. And this, of course, is huge revelation when you think about the implications for maybe the election and other things, but we'll leave that for now. I think what we really need to focus on is the potential. What this guy was saying is that Starlink has maybe being used by Russian operatives, right, Russian spy agencies, to access all our government data that Doge has gained access to.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, they maybe have been able to siphon off some of this data to Russia, which is, of course, horrendous when you think about the consequences. And that is one of the most interesting stories I've seen in the last year, and it's receiving very little attention. The guy also said, by the way, that the Department of Energy had been accessed in this way, and that nuclear facilities had also been compromised and had been left open to the internet, which I thought was mind blowing when you think about the implications that our nuclear facilities could be compromised in this way. So let's listen to you and your take on this. But it's a huge story in my mind.
Yeah, I did a piece about it today. It's kind of a follow up to the great piece you did about it on your narrative Substack the other day, which sort of updated the story. And I think you've included most of it, with the exception of the fact that you can also add on not only did Russia have backdoor access instantaneously as soon as Doge got God mode clearance and was able to get into the actual National Labor Relation Board mainframe, but over 10 million gigabytes of data is missing. Missing, gone. They can't find it.
Deleted?
Don't know, because no one's talking about it. No one's able to kind of figure it out. And keep in mind, folks, we're not conspiracy theorists. We're just kind of telling you what's been reported by Rachel Maddow at MSNBC, NPR, a couple of other people, and we're putting all of these different stories together so you can kind of understand the breadth and width of what the allegations are. But the allegations include the 10 million gigabytes of data are missing, data that Doge was the last person to touch, and they have simply left the building. So, there are a bunch of different things at play here, and the Starlink thing is interesting because you're right, nobody's really talking about it. And I go back to when the election was called for Donald Trump so early, all those swing states. And the knowledge
Remember that night we were
Starlink
together?
was,
It was
yeah.
oh my gosh, it was a hell night for me.
And
I
the
was
very
like,
first person that knew, and I'm not a Joe
yeah,
Rogan fan, but on the Rogan podcast, he was
yeah,
talking about how he was talking to Elon, and Elon basically looked at him, and they were at Mar-a-Lago during the inauguration of Donald Trump, or when he won. And early before the polls had even closed, he looked at his phone. He goes, "We won all the swing states. Donald Trump
right.
be the president." And then he walked out. And he was the first person to get that information before everybody else. And we all know Starlink was used to transmit information during the election because it was a point of access for conveying information and data, just like every other internet company around the world. The problem is it's proprietary to Elon. He owns it, and he owns all the data, and it sits in the sky, and these trail of these comet-looking satellites that are just whipping around the earth, giving everybody access to the internet. But he's the only guy that has access to it. There are no LAN cables. There's no fiber optics. There's no nothing. And so what happens after information goes there is anybody's guess, because Elon Musk has the proprietary ownership of everything to do with Starlink. Nobody else does, to the point where he refused to give it to the American military a while ago. And the American military then backed out of using Starlink. And we all know that Starlink is being used heavily in Europe, specifically in Ukraine. And there are
Hmm.
Starlink parts that are literally on some of the drones that the Ukrainian army is actually finding. There
Yeah.
are receivers that connect with Starlink that are on those. We do also know that Russia is using Starlink heavily, and they're trying to get into the Ukrainian Starlink system. So, if you're going to sit there and ask yourself a question when you hear a story like we heard on Maddow and what you just recounted about Starlink possibly being involved in what Doge is doing, and you question it, you're dumb, because Starlink's definitely involved. He's wrapping all of his companies up in this thing. Anything that can benefit from stealing information, any one of his companies, whether it's the surveillance company he wants to put together with Teal, whether it's Starlink, whether it's X, which, as we know, X is a AI company now, as well as a social media company, which is just a giant shithole. I kind of made my announcement there today because we're on Substack. I'm like, man, when I took my head out of this place, I didn't realize how much it sucked. I'm out of here. But
Hmm.
everything to do with information, anything to do with Starlink is all proprietary to Elon Musk. So if that is the case, and Ms. Maddow's reporting is correct, and this whistleblower is right, and we're not hearing anything about it, I hope to fucking God there's an investigation into this, man. It is
Well,
some of the more egregious look away, damaging, awful reporting I have heard about Elon Musk and Doge and what he's doing to the United States, because he's not doing it to the United States. He's doing it for other countries. If you know anything about what this man's all about at all.
you're absolutely right. And let me underline what you're saying, that Rachel Maddow and NPR have stepped out and reported this, so has Reuters, but there has been a deafening silence from everybody else. And
Zero.
that to me is incredibly worrying because this is actually a very big story. It's interesting. One of my followers was asked Grok this question: can a satellite collect data from or transmit data to a computer that's not connected to the internet? So this is the question we all have on our minds. Like, how is it possible if there's no direct connection to the internet? Can Starlink just beam up all this information? And according to Grok, it says, yes, a satellite can collect data or transmit data to a computer not connected to the internet, provided the computer is equipped with the necessary hardware, such as a satellite a modem or a transceiver and appropriate software to interface with the satellite. For data collection, the computer could receive signals directly from satellite, weather data, GPS signals, or imagery using a compatible receiver. For transmission, the computer could send data to satellite via an uplink, assuming it has a transmitter and access to a satellite network. This setup is common in remote sensing, satellite telephony, or dedicated satellite communication systems where internet connectivity is not required. So what Grok is telling us here is that yes, if you have a uplink of some sort, and clearly Doge had that uplink, has an uplink like that, I would imagine they do, then sure, absolutely, Starlink can just suck up that data. That's what it's designed to do, and extrapolate that to what might have happened in the elections. And then you really have to ask yourself, most of these voting machines and most of these tabulation machines have transmitters in them. Whether they're satellite uplink transmitters or not, I'm not sure, but they do have transmitters in them. That's how they communicate
Yep.
between the tabulator and the actual voting machine. So if there is a way for data to go all the way up to Starlink using, those tabulated machines or using the actual voting machines, we need to go back and revisit every single vote in the 2024 election. And maybe that's why no one is really asking these questions, because the answers are kind of mind blowing.
Well, and the information can go both ways too, right, Zev? It doesn't
Hmm.
just go from America up to a Starlink
Yes.
satellite. It goes anywhere up to a Starlink satellite and go into America. So you're talking about vote fixing, vote rigging. You're not just talking about surveillance. You're not just talking about triggering people with social media posts and 5,000 different data points on each individual user being gathered and then analyzed and then turned into a message. You're talking literally about being able to push a button or a keystroke in a different country and affect something nothing on a machine here in the United States is sensitive as a voting machine. So, the questions that we're asking, I think, are questions that a lot of people are asking if they've been paying attention to this. And to your point about the media, there no profiles encouraged when it comes to mainstream media, and I get how afraid the United States media is of stories like this that have anything to do with Donald Trump, anything to do with Elon Musk. When you're watching Americans get disappeared into El Salvadorian concentration camps run by dictators in El Salvador. So I understand that. I also understand that Donald Trump has horse collared, a whole bunch of different law offices to give him $1 billion in pro bono work to go after people that say anything. So I understand that. I understand that Paramount is settling a lawsuit they shouldn't. CBS just did the same thing. I understand that he wants to go after CBS and take their license. He's threatening the head of the FCC to do that. But my God, like this is not time for should we or shouldn't we because we might lose an advertiser. Should we or shouldn't we because we might get like a terse note from Pam Bondi. Barb, it's wild to me that very few organizations, and only the ones that are currently being targeted by Donald Trump and Elon Musk, like NPR, like Rachel Maddow, who seems to be invincible. I know Donald Trump likes to take swipes at, MSNBC and says no one listens to him, but he says that about everybody that reports honestly on him. It's like a canned response that dollar store Trump up here, Pierre Poilievre, gives every single time he stands in front of a fucking microphone. But at some point, NBC, CBS, Comcast, everybody that has a license to broadcast the news or information, every newspaper, every digital outlet has to start talking about the most important thing to Americans being stolen from them, which is their privacy, which is their fucking free will and their desire to live in a reality that they get to choose who they vote for and what they vote for, because that is what we're talking about here. It's not only the theft of information by Doge, 10 million gigabytes. It's not only the access they seem to have given Russia to be able to fiddle around inside U.S. systems. It's the idea that all your information now has a straight pipe to a dictator all across the world that's part of the axis of evil that's been working with Elon Musk to destroy your country from within. I mean, that's really what we're talking about, and the media is doing nothing, dude. Like nothing.
Not only your country. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. So if you want to,
No, I'm glad you did. I was done.
Yeah, okay. But it's not only what's happening inside America. Macron the other day, Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, laid out of two very stark paths for the world. Mm-hmm. One which showed Russia sort of defeating Ukraine and America standing by Russia, which is where we see every day more and more. It seems like Russia and under Putin and Trump under America under Trump are aligned together, and he outlined a vision there and a path which leads to nothing short of the most cataclysmic world war you can imagine. So, the more America stands with Putin, the more America stands on the side of Russia and against Ukrainians, the more Europe has to stand up to Russia and send their forces into Ukraine, which they're likely to do now. The more Putin, and feeling emboldened by America, feeling emboldened by Trump, is going to start pushing his way into the rest of Europe. And that is how World War III commences. And so when we're talking about, these issues that are about privacy and all of that, but it's also about the destiny of every single American and the destiny of every single individual on this planet, because we know that world wars may excite a few people who sell weapons, but they kill millions and millions of people. Mm-hmm. And what we'll land up is in a cataclysmic event where it's not just about privacy anymore. It's about whether your kids are going to war to fight an illegitimate war on behalf of Vladimir Putin, or whether your kids are going to fight against the Nazified MAGA Trump America, because they have to be stopped because they've gotten so out of control. And so these implications are so massive that these small issues about whether we privacy and all of that seem quite small relative to that.
Yeah.
But this is where we're heading. We're heading into a surveillance state. And, Olga Lautman and I are doing a show tomorrow night at 8 p.m. About this very thing, just combining our efforts here about what Doge has done and what Doge is trying to do by stealing all this data, by cross-referencing all this data, is they will know absolutely everything about everybody. And they will start eliminating people who are journalists, people who are extremists in their opinion. There were 4 journalists today in Russia who were sentenced for being extremists.
Mm-hmm.
4 journalists who were sentenced to being
And a
extremists.
hairdresser. Yeah.
And a hairdresser.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a revenge thing apparently from a neighbor that got the hairdresser in trouble. You know that she got blackmailed basically by her neighbor who wanted a piece of land. That's how these things can get so out of hand. But the Russian approach to this thing is target everyone as an extremist, get rid of any opposition, get rid of the father of the new Navalny has also been put into a terror list today in Russia. So you've got this, families are being called extremists. You've got reporters being called extremists. You've got hairdressers being called extremists. You know, anyone who's perceived to be someone who's opposed to the regime, who's opposed to Trump, could face jail. And with all that, the end of freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of association, you name it.
Yeah, and in America, their version of extremists is terrorists. So they'll call anybody that they don't like a terrorist. People from other countries they don't like terrorists, gangs terrorists. In Canada, they're bone to pick with Canada over the fentanyl thing. I don't know if you remember it. It was really actually quite fucking funny, and it was really funny for a solid month. Where they're like, there's a bunch of fentanyl coming across the border from Canada, and we're like, there's no terrorists here. Like we don't, we don't have those things. We're not extremists. And then that got debunked, and he's like, oh yeah, well the Mexican cartels have taken over Canada, and they're the ones bringing in the fentanyl. And then we're like, yeah, actually, no, that's not happening. And then they just slapped the tariffs on, and now nobody's talking about the fentanyl tariffs anymore because they're all lies. But it's what they hide behind is that fear that extremists or terrorists are going to kill you, and they're doing something good for you. But under the umbrella of extremists or terrorists, they are going to round up everybody, and it's happening in Russia. It's been happening in Russia for years and years and years. God, they think gay people in Russia are extremists. They round those people up, send them to the front lines. The poor people are trying to just get by. And it doesn't matter if you're gay, doesn't matter if you're Muslim, doesn't matter if you're black, doesn't matter if maybe you might have a limp, you could have a club foot. That's who they're literally targeting and saying, well, you're an extremist, you have to go to the front line. And there's people with club feet. Like literally, I read a report, some guy with a club foot that was in some kind of hospice setting was sent to the front lines. He was like, what are you talking about? They're like, you're an extremist. You said something about Vladimir Putin a couple years ago, so you're going. Anyway,
and think about what they need to think about the information they need to have access to in order to get that. See, think about, just to close the circle back to Starlink here. They need a lot of data to know exactly what you said about Vladimir Putin 2 years ago on social media, or who you might have associated with. Russia has the tools, has the infrastructure already to have a surveillance state. Now, Elon Musk is pumping up all this data about Americans so they can input that into their surveillance tools and start doing the same thing to Americans. That is why this is such an urgent crisis.
Totally.
People really need to pay attention to.
Well, what does Russia control more than anything in Russia? What does Putin control more than anything in Russia? Information.
Yeah.
All of it. It doesn't matter what it is. He's got his own satellites, doesn't allow YouTube. That country is literally in a bubble of information where Russians are literally walking around going, apparently there's a skirmish to the south of us. Like that's what's happening in Russia. Like they don't know. And then they'll hear stories like, oh, your brother, 17-year-old brother got taken out of an MMA gym in the middle of St. Petersburg and got sent to the front line. Must have been a criminal, because that's the message that they send out. So how does Donald Trump and Elon Musk turn the United States and North America, which is the effort, right? It's not just North America. They want Canada. They want to do this to Canada too. How do they control the narrative? How do they control information? How do they control knowledge? Well, they can't out and out just nationalize media outlets like Putin did. He can't do that in the United States. So what do? You lie to everybody. You tell them you're going to go get the deep state, and you're going to go after everybody who's been wasting your money. And then you put a bunch of code into all of those mainframes, steal all the information, silo where it goes to something that's proprietary to you and your goons. And you legitimately have soft turned the United States into Russia, into a closed society, into a society that gets no information, or the information that they get is highly curtailed to benefit the leaders of that country to keep them in power. That's what's happening. It's exactly the same thing. The levers are different. It looks different because if Donald Trump just decided to nationalize every news service and start shutting people down, there would literally be a revolution in the United States. So this is the smarter way for him to do what Putin has done to Russia over the past 25 years.
But they will have now information, and that's already well said. But and they'll now have information to go after individuals in a way that might not be legitimate. Tish, what's her name? Letitia James in New York,
Yeah.
who was probably the only person who could probably go after Donald Trump still under any sort of judicial inquiry. Today is now facing a mortgage IRS fraud investigation that is initiated by Donald Trump. So you can see exactly how this works. It's not that
As
they'll
she
get
was,
you.
by the way, as she was readying a lawsuit and an investigation
Yeah.
into insider trading at the White House during the actual tariff attack, right?
Right, that's the
people need that
investigation.
context.
Yeah, right.
And
Thank
and
you
on
very
top
much.
of it, how did they get that information? Well, they've been busy inside the most sensitive information systems over the past couple of years for a couple of reasons. One, to farm and sell information, gather the information. Two, to own all the information. And three, to look for any information on anybody they can find where they can bring up a file and go, oh, Letitia James may have committed mortgage fraud back in 1992. This is information nobody would be able to have. And so it
Mhm.
goes back to that memo that Marco Rubio put out as the Secretary of State, where he effectively said, and this was crazy, he's like, we're going to come after anybody who's ever done anything in the past, anything presently, or anything in the future that doesn't meet the expectations of this government. Well, there you go, Letitia James. They now have information about you, which you didn't expect them to have. Maybe it's accurate, maybe it's not. Chances are it's a ruse, and they're just trying to gin everybody up. And they've taken something, turned it into something else for a lawsuit against a woman who is investigating Donald Trump and all of his asshole friends for wrecking the stock market to short the stock market so everybody could make money as they decided to lift tariffs and get in quick so you can get out with all the dough. Like it is truly fucking amazing to me that no one's talking about this aspect of this data breach as well.
And there's, someone said on the chat here that no one in America is safe, and that is exactly correct. Because it may not be you today, you may escape this today, but at any point in your future, no matter what you think no matter how you straight down the line, no matter how obedient or loyal you think you can be, or your family can be under these extreme circumstances. Not that anyone would wish that, but they could come after you because they can just see so much. And this data that they now have, that the Russians even now have, probably is enough for them to start doing this. They don't even need to create new laws. They just have to dive into this data and see all that they can cross-reference. I did another story, and I'm sorry to go on a little bit here. This is sort of a blend of a couple of stories we're trying to do today. But I did another story about the number of people inside Doge with connections to the Russians. And not only to the Russians, but to Russian oligarchs who are close to Vladimir Putin. There's a guy in there right now whose name is, I'm going to have to pull it up, sorry, but I'll tell you. And then there's Mr. Big Balls as well. Did you know Mr. Big Balls is the grandson of a well-known KGB
FSB
spy?
agent. Yeah.
Yeah, a KGB spy who may have turned and supported America for some point, but nevertheless, he's got direct ties to Russia's KGB. There's another guy in there with direct ties to a close friend of Vladimir Putin's. His wife worked for the venture capital firm that is involved in a lot of illegal shielded transactions in the United States on behalf of this oligarch. Because this oligarch is sanctioned, they've created this venture firm where they can do these deals and support all these companies. He's not allowed to have ownership, but the venture firm is. There's a guy who's married to that woman who worked at that firm, who's currently working in Doge. And that person, he's the one person who's been going up to the IRS demanding access to all their database. That particular guy is the guy leading the charge for the IRS access. So why? So he can go after Tish James. So he can go after any single person that they view as a threat. And this is why this story, the Doge story, is the most significant story of the day, even though it's number 5 on our list. People
It's
need to
huge.
be this Saturday when people go out there and start protesting. You can have many things on your signs, but the one thing that needs to happen is they need to shut down Doge, and they need an investigation into Doge, because that is the thing that is imperiling America right now,
Yeah.
without a doubt, in my mind. That is the number one thing that's imperiling America. Story number 4, although that was actually that was the Tish James story was a separate story for me in my
Well,
mind. But we'll just merge those two if you want.
no
Sorry, go ahead.
problem. Yeah. No,
Okay,
no, good.
but also a related story at number 3. This is the story about Ed Martin. So Ed Martin is the U.S. attorney or suppose he's acting U.S. attorney right now for the Trump administration. You've been going on about the story for a few days now.
Mhm.
Ed Martin is a right-wing extremist, and is being appearing in front of the Senate and attempting to be confirmed by the Senate without declaring a very significant thing. He forgot to declare that he is a regular contributor to Russia Today and to Sputnik News, I believe, and that he's been on, according to this, 250 times in the last few years. This is
Mhm.
a Russian state propaganda news agency, basically. And the U.S. attorney, the guy that Donald Trump has chosen to be the U.S. attorney, is a regular contributor to these Russian propaganda outlets. I mean, I don't know. You know more about the story than I have, but it is stunning to find out that this is where we're heading. With the U.S. attorney who's Mister, Mister, please let's all hold up Donald Trump as the dear leader. That guy is also
Mhm.
tied to Russia.
Yeah. Ed Martin is his name. Ed's a good
Mm.
dude. Ed's just trying to make a quick living working for Russia Today. 250 times. Apparently about 350 grand a year he's been making from Russia Today, which is fascinating. But Russia has all kinds of tools at their disposal too, Zev. And you're familiar with the tenant mess, right? You're familiar with the
Yeah,
10 million that they pumped into Tim Pool's bank account, Lauren Southern's bank
yeah, of
account,
course.
a couple of other people's bank accounts. That it was very expensive. It's very
Yeah,
expensive to have people repeat Russian messaging here in North America, and so you got to pay because they're like, "What if I get caught?" And they're like, "Can I make it worth your while?" But then there are people like Ed Martin, who is one of those guys who's never been able to kind of keep a job. Pardon me, I gotta apologize. I had to have a quick break there and go and open the door.
no
But
worries.
then there are guys like Ed Martin who he's one of those bit players in a gig economy, right? Where you've got a bunch of people that are running around who have figured out a way to make themselves important to guys like Donald Trump, right? And so what Donald Trump does, he'll look at his buddy Putin and go, I need a guy to do something for me. He's like, take that guy because he's really friendly to us. He's been really nice to us. And he's been on our T for, the last 4 or 5 years, giving us some great content. We have Canadian guys that are on, like Dimitri Lascaris, who is on. He is a Canadian who does a ton of work for RT, who has now been forced to leave Canada. So he does his RT work from the beautiful country of Greece. And I talked to a friend of mine named Marcus Kolga, who's from the McDonald-Laurier Institute.
Yeah,
He's a
Marcus is
senior
great.
fellow. He's awesome. We've been
Yeah,
on with him before. He's just superb at what he does. And he said, Russia's incredible because what they do is they give people way more money than anyone will give them to do a job that no one in this country or in the United States will do. And somehow, slowly, they bring those people around. It's not just, I'm going to pay you, you're going to do this because you don't believe in it. They're like, we're going to give you a bunch of money. Then we're going to send you to the Bahamas for the weekend. And then they'll honeypot the person in the Bahamas. And then they'll come back and go, by the way, you got to continue to do this because we've got this video of you in the Bahamas with 3 Bahamian hookers. And he's like, okay. And they'll continue to treat him well and he'll sing for his supper because now his entire future is attached to that. His entire paycheck is attached to that. And Ed Martin is one of those guys, as is Donald Trump. And I take you back to the Steele dossier and the PP tape. It's
Mm.
amazing because Russia does this and China does this. They'll be really nice to people that they're going to work, that they need, that they want, and they'll tell you they're your friend, and they'll tell you how important you are. And I know people in media this has happened to, so bear with me. And they go to people who are on kind of the fringes, maybe someone who didn't have a career, didn't have a great career. And I'm not saying she gets paid by them, but I'll bring up Rupa Subramanya. She's one of those people that they would maybe target. I know she's very pro Modi, very anti-Canadian. She is in Canada. She does that kind of work, and they put money in pockets of people that are really kind of average at this job, and they turn them into superstars, and then they compromise them. So don't question whether or not there's a PP tape of Ed Martin in the Bahamas, because I can
Oh,
guarantee you there probably is.
I can tell you my story too, and I maybe will in a second, but it's
Is
a
there
bit
a
long.
PP tape of you out there, dude?
I have no idea. There's a PP
Huh?
tape of me. I hope not. But there's a certainly,
You
I
saying
have
you have
been,
no idea actually worries me a little bit.
I by extraction, but I've certainly been targeted by these guys. I've had
Yeah.
Russia Today call me up many times and ask me to
Hmm.
be on Russia Today, and of course, what any normal human being just says and does is go fuck yourself. No, thank you very much. I do not want to appear on your show, no matter how many thousands of dollars you want to pay me. But subsequent to that, I've also had people, who are well known in this world, approach me and try make me part of their, spy operation. Basically, their influence ops. Try, coerce me, try to offer me money, try to offer me, um, real status within their world. If I take the bite and start doing the kind of content they want me to do. Now, I'm not that kind of person. I can't sacrifice my editorial principles like that. I'm just not capable of that.
Yeah.
But I know that there people are. I mean, I just have to, and it's happened to me enough times, or at least one significant time. It was a long period of time. These guys really worked hard to try and make me part of their world. I found it interesting to report on, and I sort of was able to keep my distance from that. But it is very, very, very difficult when they have their eye on you and their desire
Hmm.
to make you one of theirs. If they really want you, they will put up a lot of effort to try and get you try and get you, and they'll sweeten the deal time after time.
Oh my
And for
God.
someone like
It,
Donald Trump, it's a sweet thing to do because
oh yeah.
listen, I'm
It's free
broke.
money.
I have no money in the world because I didn't say yes to this stuff. Had I said yes to the stuff, I could have been really, I'd be a very different person,
Mhm.
but or living a very different life. Maybe not a different person, but a very different life. And I had to say no. I had to say no because for me, there's only like one guiding principle as a journalist, and it's one thing that I committed to early on in my career, which is you got to tell the truth. You got to
Hmm.
find the truth. You got to tell the truth. That's it.
Hmm.
Now, other people don't see the world like that. Other people see the world in different ways, and I believe that Ed Martin, who's also, by the way, if I remember correctly, was one of the organizers of the insurrection. He was one of the organizers of
Yeah.
Stop the Steal.
Yeah. He was. Yeah.
So it's like, this is how you can see how these things combine. And you've got the guy who is was part of the organizing committee for the insurrection, is now the U.S. attorney for the United States that Donald Trump has selected. The guy organizing the insurrection is the
Yeah.
guy who's going to be the U.S. attorney. And he works
Yeah,
for
well,
Russia.
the guy who pardoned all the insurrectionists and benefited from the
Yeah,
insurrection wants to pay reparations to these insurrectionists. It's like 1,600 people wants to give him money and say thank you
of
for
course. Get him on the payroll
storming the
is what he's
building and
thinking.
thank you
Yeah.
for trying to kill. So we live in fucking bizarro world, Zev. And to your point, you share with me parts of that story. Our story is not dissimilar, where you get someone calling you, someone by the name of Dean, which was not me, saying we'll give you all this money if you just let us put a couple of posts up there a month, but we need you to put them out. We need you to kind of draw attention to some things that are going on, inject some questions into the atmosphere as to who's responsible for what. Dozens of times we've been contacted to post things, and the funny part is that they know that people in media in this country get paid shit. Same thing with the United States. They know that this is a contracting industry. It's not a growth industry. There's no revenue here. Newspapers are closing, media outlets are dying, and so it's really really simple for them. And what's not important, which should be more important to people who love democracy,
Mm.
it should be as important to people who love democracy as it is to people who love authoritarianism, to own media. to own that straight pipe of information in the information superhighway, to own outlets, to support outlets. They don't do it.
No, they
And
don't.
Russia found out early on, hey, yeah, if we're gonna keep and this is going back to Stalin, this is every major dictator in the history of the world. Control the information, control the universities, keep people dumb, keep people uninformed, and you can make them do pretty much anything you want them to do. Now, that's really the bleed into Canada and the United States over the past several years, where, we get information from a bunch of different places. Canada recently turned off RT, which was right before the actual convoy. If you remember that, Canada's like, we're going to delist Russia today. That had a lot to do, obviously, with the war in Ukraine as well. But Canada would in our case, we have the ability to do that. We have the ability to turn off Fox News. We have the ability to geofence certain outlets. The United States won't. And the funny part is that what they do is they hide behind two words: free speech. And they'll go, you can't censor us. That's free speech. And then they'll bring it back to that whole freedom play, which is that's not what it's
Well, I mean,
about.
they did
They're trying to
fire,
use
RT.
but they're trying to use free speech
Yeah.
to force hate speech, propaganda, and to force the what's going on right now down your throats. And that's why
Yeah.
we're here. To your point.
And this is why it's important that everyone supports the independent journalists that they follow on Substack and elsewhere, because without your actual support, there is no other support. It's not like we can go dip into the special bank of liberal-minded or centrist kind of
Go
funders.
woke, go broke is not a joke, by the way.
Yeah,
like
so-
it's not. And that, to your point, that's why it's so important that people support truth telling here on apps like Substack. Whether you subscribe, whether you pay to subscribe, whether you support, whether you become a founding member, if you trust a voice and you go to those voices for trusted information that you can vet, that you can look at and go, okay, that affirms my view of the information that I've been receiving, you should support those people. And free or paid, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you stick really close to the people you can verify information from. Stick really close to people who aren't trying to trigger you with propaganda. Follow those people and follow multiples of those people. This is really fucking important. We've morphed from that conversation into a conversation about disinformation and propaganda. But the effort to control what you hear, feel, see, hear, and touch is very real. And it kind of goes back to the Doge conversation, which we talked about as well, right? It is impossible for people to get accurate reporting from dying industries that are dying because it's intentional, that have contracted because that's also intentional, and are feeding you information as if Donald Trump is a legitimate president. By vote, he is. That is not a legitimate human being. What he chooses to do are not legitimate operations. They're not things that America should look at and go, well, I guess maybe I could see the rationale behind leaving Ukraine in the dirt. Right? Maybe I guess I could kind of see the rationale about becoming an isolationist state. No, you're being sold awful things every day by an ecosystem that has legitimately spent years trying to capture how you read, what you watch, and the reality with which you surmise what you read and what you watch, and whether or not it's real. So make sure that you follow independent people. Happy that you follow us, but keep an eye on what you read. It's never been more important. I say that to my kids all the time, Zev.
Yeah.
It's never been more important for you to not read something or watch something on TikTok and go, well, this has got to be true. Let me share it with people. Stop. Make sure you cross-reference and double-check.
But if it is true, share it, because the alternative, the other side of that is people like you and me. We get siloed by these algorithms, right? They'll take our availability basically and just send it to just our followers. They won't let it go into the graded pool. So it's really important that if you do follow and you do believe in people, that you restack them, that you retweet them, that you bring them out to your network. So otherwise, all we'll end up doing is talking just to our unique followers. So another way you can support us is just to restack it and retweet. We have number two stories. You get to pick which one you want to do. MTG or you get to do Macron and Carney, or both.
Macron and Carney. Are we not doing California?
That's what I meant. Sorry, not Macron, Carney.
Newsom, Carney.
Newsom and Carney. Sorry, Newsom and Carney or MTG.
Let's go with Marjorie Taylor Greene, because I had, it's dystopian. I don't know if anybody saw it yesterday, but she held a town hall. in Georgia. I can't remember the name of the town that she was in, Actung, Georgia, or something like that.
Yeah, it's like suburbia,
And
you know?
yeah, and what happened yesterday should be should be a very chilling, visual for Americans who want to be involved in politics and want to hold
Mhm.
power to account, want to talk to their chosen representative at any town hall, or disagree with a congressman or woman, disagree with a senator. These town halls are popping up all over the place because if you demand a town hall from your constituent leader, then that constituent leader, a congressman, congresswoman, has to come and answer questions. So Marjorie Taylor Greene had one of these, couple hundred people inside, few hundred people protesting outside, and what broke out was absolute fucking brown shirt mayhem.
Mhm.
Um, 5 people were arrested. 4 had to be taken to the hospital. 2 were tased. And these were people that simply had an issue with what she was saying, asked her a question that she gave a response to that they didn't like, held a sign up that said freedom or traitor. 2 men were tased and viciously beaten. And if you go to my Substack, you can watch it.
Mm.
This was the start of how the standard in the United States when it comes to discourse, when you talk to an elected official, specifically a MAGA elected official, this is going to start happening more and more and more because this is what Donald Trump wants. He wants the police, men and women in uniform. Heard a story today that he's even going to deputize citizens to keep an eye on rallies at town halls, right? Militia people, to beat the shit out of other people that disagree with what that elected representative is saying. Or beat the shit out of that person or tase them, and co-opting the police forces in those towns to also help, which is what we saw yesterday. There was a video of a gentleman who was asking a question. He's in a hoodie, probably mid-50s, who gets pulled out of his seat for asking the wrong question of Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was, by the way, mocking some of the questionnaires and some of the people asking questions like, poor Christina, you're too dumb, you don't get it. I'm not answering that question because y'all are brainwashed. Like that, those are some of the things. And then she would go on this fire hose of propaganda and disinformation and pure lies about, finding fraud and how great Elon is and how great Trump is. This is the same dear leader shit. So it
How
wasn't
much
a
money
town
did she
hall.
make just the other day on
It
that?
was a brawl. Something like 12 million she
I
made during
mean,
the stock bump. Yeah. So
basically insider trading.
yeah, well, I hope Tish James gets to the bottom of that.
Yeah.
But the bigger and more concerning issue was watching the police beat the shit out of people who
Mhm.
simply wanted to ask the person who was representing them in Congress a question and tase them. 2 of them got tased viciously, and you can hear them getting shot. One guy, it's a black gentleman. He gets wrestled and pulled out, punched a couple of times. He's so big, like 5 cops can't control him, so they let him go. And he starts walking towards the exit. They jump him and hit him with a taser twice. Bang, bang. Bang, bang. You
As
hear
he's
the dude
walking
scream
out.
as he's walking out. And the really sick part were all the maggots that were laughing in the town hall. Ha, 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 ha. All white, by the way. Those are the people that were laughing at that black man. Folks, listen, your bravery is incredible in the United States. It's been awesome to watch. But what I saw yesterday, and you can go to my Substack and read it, and you can watch the videos. They're right there, which are, by the way, getting scrubbed from Twitter as we speak. Um, be careful, right? I mean, when you go to these things, speak your mind, but be careful. Be careful. Don't fight back. If the cops tell you to leave, leave. Like if someone grabs a taser, you don't need to get tased. America, you beautiful pieces of freedom, you look out for yourselves. It's going to be really important over the next 4 years. I mean, we're only 2 months into this, but the beatings have already started. The SS and the brown shirts are already here, and he's talking about deputizing more, which is straight out of Berlin. So, heads up, everybody, heads up.
And I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who reminded me that for Mao and for Stalin and for Hitler, it took 6 months to consolidate power in a kind of hardline fashion that they did, that before it was, you couldn't turn back. We are, 2, 3 months into this process, and look how much power they're already gathering. Look how much power Donald Trump has already amassed. There is a window here, as a narrow window, which I think is already beginning to shut. If America can act in this short window, the trajectory of the earth can turn away from war and
Oh, yeah.
towards peace. But if Americans think that they can just sit out and stay at home and someone else is going to take care of this, I don't think that's the case. I think Americans need to go and they need to evict this government. It's their job.
Yeah,
It's
Canada can't
Congress's
do it. We're
job.
busy bankrupting the man. So,
Yeah, but it might have to be Canada, but that's war. That is
Yeah.
war. And at the end of the day, there is this tiny window. It's yeah, you can hear it shutting right now because you can hear the Europeans arming, you can hear the Canadians turning their back on America, and you can see all this disgusting due process that's been thrown out
Yeah.
the window time and time again. These people getting tasered at public gatherings. You can see where this is going, guys. You can see what Doge is doing with all this stolen data, where they're going with that. This is not going to get prettier. This gets much, much, much worse from
Oh,
here.
this is just the track greasing portion of
Yeah.
authoritarianism. This is the prelude.
Yeah, which brings us to our number one story, which we're going to talk to you about, Abrego Garcia. But if there ever is an example of the dehumanization of Americans and the stripping away of the essential rights that are what America is all about, we have these rules in this that have made America the impressive country that it's been. It's had a Bill of Rights, and it's got a due process, and it's always considered, well, not always, I guess, since the 14th Amendment, that a person who was living in the United States is considered a citizen. That a immigrant, if they're an immigrant, is a person of the United States and deserves the same due process as any other person, regardless of whether you think that they are a gang member or you think that they're a terrorist or whatever. They are owed due process. And the fact that we are going around this country inviting people to come in for immigration appointments that are, routine immigration appointments, where immigrants are expecting just the usual routine to happen. And they're getting arrested at those meetings. The
Did
story
you see
of
that dude that got arrested going in to sign papers for his green card the other day?
Yeah. This is a American returning from Canada, got arrested. But, not only are we arresting people who are showing up for their regular immigration meetings with their immigration officer, we're sending them to another country without due process for lifetime imprisonment by another sovereign country. There is nothing more debasing for the Constitution. There's nothing more vile. Can you imagine any single person on the street can be picked up and sent to El Salvador gulag that basically is a hellhole, a concentration camp that people cannot be returned from? And this is where, I guess the Senator von Holland is now trying to find Abrego Garcia. I don't know if he's been able to find him yet, but there are 230 other people that we know of who are there without any criminal charges, who are there because their immigration officials decided they were, I don't know, suspect somehow. And because Donald Trump has said it's okay, they've been thrown into jail in another country without due process. And this is about every American. This is not just about these immigrants or undocumented immigrants. These are American people, and the same guy is the guy who got stopped on the way in from Canada when he returned home from Canada. These people deserve the same protections. This is not other people. This is the same principle that applies to them, applies to every American citizen. And we need to take this seriously, especially this coming Saturday as these protests take place. I think Abrego Garcia is going to be a big name, but every other one of these 238 needs to be paid attention to, and America needs to stand up for its rights and get their rights back.
Yeah, you're starting to see some of the states push back too, like California. They launched a massive lawsuit against Donald Trump and these tariffs. Gavin Newsom put one out today, just a quick aside, saying basically we stand with Canada and Mexico and we're going to push back. And then he put out another video the day before that going, hey, Canada, hey, listen, we're going to get some programs going here to keep you traveling, because California has been absolutely fucking decimated by Canada and our inability and in disinterest in traveling down to that country right now. They've lost billions and billions and billions of dollars, billions to and manufacturing, same thing. They're starting to lose because, as you know, tariffs slow manufacturing down. Da 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 da. So it's the economic engine, the manufacturing hub of the United States is legitimately in California. So, you know, we're starting to see some of that pushback from states. Like that was the first time. I know Pritzker out of Illinois has been really vocal, but no one's done anything yet. And I hope they start doing something, because to your point, which is our number one story, Mr. Abrego Garcia is still missing in action. Help me, is he a senator or is Mr. Holland a congressman? Senator Holland, from the great state of where? Senator Von Holland? Great state of somewhere?
New Hampshire?
New Hampshire? New Hampshire guy? Is he a East Coaster?
I know these things so well, but I don't remember right now.
It doesn't matter. Anyway, I watched a video today of him. He's a nice sandy-haired gentleman that speaks really well. Goes down to El Salvador today. Leaves this morning, goes down, meets with the vice president of El Salvador. He presents himself, and he's like, okay, gig's up. We've got a court order from the Supreme Court.
Chris Van Holland is Maryland. I'm sorry.
Maryland. What's his name?
Of course, he's Chris Van Holland. And he's he's the senator who Abrego Garcia lived in that.
Gotcha. Okay, he's Abrego Garcia's
Sorry about that, guys. I'm
senator.
better at this. Yeah,
dude, we're freewheeling it today. Don't worry about it. It's okay. We don't have to. You don't have to be right all the time. So Van Hollen goes down and says, "Present this man," and they're like, "Not allowed." And he goes, "Why aren't you allowed?" He's like, "Because Donald Trump is paying us to keep him." Says those are his words.
He said that.
The vice president of El Salvador said, "We can't give you back your guy who's totally innocent, and we don't have any proof that he's a gang member for MS-13 from El Salvador either."
Because he's not.
We can't, because he's not, exactly.
Yeah.
And he's like, "But we can't bring him back, and we can't give him to you, and we can't release him because the president of the United States is paying us to keep him here."
$6 million a year.
His fucking words. The president of the United States is paying for us to keep him here. That is now, according to Judge Boasberg, who's presided over the case, who put out a ruling today, said, this is called criminal contempt. Not only have you not produced this man, not only have you not done what I said, but you've obfuscated, and now you're mocking the courts. You are in criminal contempt. Whether or not Justice Boasberg is allowed to hold Donald Trump and this government in criminal contempt, whether or not the Supreme Court, who's clearly on side with Trump because he put them all there, is going to side with Judge Boasberg to put some teeth into any kind of criminal contempt order, remains to be seen. But that legitimately happened today, where the vice president said, "We can't give you your innocent man back who's rotting away in a death camp because Donald Trump is paying us to keep him here."
Donald Trump is paying for the kidnapping and hostage taking and human trafficking of an individual who's done nothing wrong from the United States and who's being kidnapped and smuggled into another country, into a prison where he's being held hostage.
You got it.
This is being done by the President of the United States of America. And the Supreme Court is essentially saying, well, we can't hold him up for any crimes. He's allowed to commit crimes. So, wink, wink, may actually suggest that they may let him get away with it, even though the administration is still beholden to doing what the other judge said, which was facilitate the return. And you're right about, Judge Boasberg saying that there is now a probable cause for contempt, and he's planning on hearing from defendants about this on April 23rd. But what you're saying about Van Holland and what his response was is that the president of the United States is openly being, there's evidence now that the president of the United States kidnapped an American citizen, basically an American person,
and paid to send him somewhere so that
trafficked him to another country.
You got it.
Paid for his keeping in a torture chamber, basically in a prison for the extended period of time, having committed zero crime.
Do you know how angry we get
at the president of the United States?
Do you know how angry we get at Andrew Tate? You know how angry we got at Epstein? You know how angry we got at Puff Diddy? For other reasons. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah, of course.
It's the exact same thing. It's the purchase of a human being by abducting that human being and then selling that human being for a fee to another country.
Slavery,
It's
basically.
fucking human trafficking and slavery.
Mhm.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
It is
Absolutely.
absolutely disgusting. It's beyond the pale. It's not even, to think that the American president is willing to do something like this, and openly, and all these people, these sycophants out there protecting him, Bondi and Marco. I mean, this is ridiculous.
What do
This
you?
is
So let me ask you a question. What do you call it when you look in the history books and you see stories of British, French, German, Dutch ships that landed in different countries in
Mhm.
Africa who went around collecting people, right? Collecting them, putting them in chains and
Yeah.
shackles, putting them on a transportation device, and disappearing them to another country, never to come back again
Mhm.
for a fee. What do you call that? You call that the fucking slave trade.
Yeah, of course. This is worse. I mean, this is worse than the slave trade. It's this man is facing possible death, and I'm not saying the slaves didn't, of course they did, but this man was on a court order not to be returned to El
Yep.
Salvador because he might be killed if he goes there, and he's been sent there by the president of the United States to his death, basically.
Yes,
And
sir.
it's interesting, by the way, that El Salvador is an interesting country because they basically have given up their assets and replaced it with crypto,
Mhm.
which ties in a whole different other dimension of Donald Trump's connections to Bukele, and it needs to be investigated. But at the core of this American president has committed a crime which is absolutely impeachable. It is the duty of the American Congress to impeach him and get rid of him from office. That is the duty of the Congress. That is what
Sure.
the Constitution clearly says is the duty of the Congress. And if they won't do it, the American people need to do it. The American people are required to remove governments or leaders that are breaking the law. That is part of the deal of being an American. And everyone who doesn't believe me should just read the Federalist Papers. I do every once in a while, or look it up in the Constitution. It's right there. American people have a duty to their future generations to evict this government. It's not only your rights that are being squandered, it's your kids' rights. And all those people who died for generations before you, who died in World War II and died in the Civil War and died in the War of Independence, guess what? Those people died because they wanted to give you those rights. They wanted to make sure
Mhm.
that you had those freedoms.
Mhm.
And so we need to, I'm sure it's there. I can feel it, but this needs to happen. And the window is so small. It's weeks, guys. It's weeks. It's not months. It's not 2 years. This isn't going to happen in the midterms. It's not going to happen in the next presidential elections. It's got to happen now if it's ever going to happen.
Agreed. Well said. Well
Thank you.
done. Yeah, nice job. Way to say
Thank
it.
you.
You really,
You too,
you really
sir.
knocked that out of the ballpark today.
I feel this today. I've been
You're really
thinking about
good.
this all day. I was like,
A little
and I
angry.
hope America. Yeah, you know what? I am angry. I'm angry that people's dignity is being completely ignored. The humanity of people is just being ignored by this man.
Yeah.
I read this incredible piece today about one of these other people that was taken down to El Salvador, and it's mind-boggling. This guy went literally to a meeting with his immigration officials, and they arrested him there. They arrested him there. This guy's done nothing
Oh,
wrong.
dude, the
He's
green
just
card one killed me. The green card, the dude's got a green. He's got a green card in hand, and he's going in to do the official signing, and he got picked up walking into the lobby. There's
Mhm.
pictures of men and women in cars with their windows being smashed in by pickaxes by ICE agents, whether they be illegal or criminals or not. There is no due process in the United States anymore. So, like I said
Brendan
earlier,
Garcia
I
was
mean,
picking up his kids from school. His autistic
his
kids from
autistic
school.
daughter from
Yeah.
school. Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
I mean, there is no look. So this is the dehumanization that happens with dictators. They're not just dehumanizing these immigrants; they're dehumanizing every American. They're desensitizing you to all these awful things because they want to do more and more of it. And if you value your humanity and if you value who you are, you need to stand up for this. And this is the time to do it. There's just no other. There's just no other time.
Agreed.
We have gone on for a bit today, and
Well, to be fair, you've gone on for a bit.
I've gone on
today.
for a bit today. Thank you. I've monopolized things a little bit. I
No,
apologize.
it means something to you, but I appreciate
Yeah.
you. Go and read Zev's stuff. There's a couple big warning shots there, specifically when it comes to the Doge stuff. Go to narrative.org, sign up for his Substack there. He's got a couple of deals. I don't know if they've expired.
No, I've extended them to the end of the month like you.
Me
'Cause
too. I did it. I
it's so
extended
nice.
mine, and it's so nice of these beautiful people.
Yeah.
Little thank you gift where you can get a subscription, of a seriously discounted subscription. Stay with us for life. Love y'all. Canada and America, we're lockstep. We'll get to some odds tomorrow. I want to talk about Canada a little bit, and I want to talk about having some fun with the Canadian election on the 28th. We've got a debate. I believe it's tonight. We've got
Is it?
Carney and Polyev going. Might be tonight, might be tomorrow. I gotta
check it
I
out.
don't know. I've been busy. I haven't been paying attention to that.
But everyone should check out dblundell.substack.com because of the MTG stuff is all there. That is important stuff. You have to see what that looked like. Plus the other stories you have in there, including
see what your
update
future
on-
town halls look like, America. Go to my Substack and read the MGT
Take it.
piece. It's a nice one.
Thanks for being here, everybody. We really appreciate you. We do look at all the comments as they scroll up, and I'm sorry we don't respond to so many of them, but we are paying lots of attention. We really thank you for being here on the FiveStack. We shall be back tomorrow at 5:30 with the Thursday edition, and tomorrow night at 8 p.m., Olga Lautman and I are doing a special about their surveillance state, so be there as well. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Have a good one, Christine.